Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he has received an invitation from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to attend the G7 summit in Kananaskis, Canada, later this month and looks forward to joining. Russia says it has responded as Russia launched over 400 drones and 40 missiles at Ukraine overnight, killing 4 people and injuring 49 according to Kyiv. The attack has caused massive damage. Meanwhile, Ukraine has called for immediate pressure on Russia following the deadly strikes. President Trump refused to speak with Elon Musk on Friday amid a feud over Trump's tax cut bill, after Musk criticized the plan publicly and threatened to decommission SpaceX's Dragon craft, though he later backed off. Hamas has signaled that they are ready to enter into new serious peace talks for a permanent ceasefire with Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel has activated some clans in Gaza who are opposed to Hamas. The European Council Chief Antonio Costa has urged the US to lift sanctions on 4 ICC judges, stressing that the EU strongly supports the court's independence and its fight against impunity. In contrast, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Trump administration praised the sanctions. A US judge has blocked Trump's 6-month ban on Harvard's international students, citing immediate and irreparable injury. Meanwhile, Harvard says the move is retaliation, with over 25% of its students being foreign nationals. President Trump says he will visit China after speaking to their leader Xi Jinping over the phone. The White House confirmed the two had a very good talk. Their meeting is set to happen this week amid heightened tensions after Trump launched a trade war and a series of reciprocal tariffs. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz warned that some US lawmakers underestimated Germany's military build-up efforts after meeting the US President Donald Trump. He backed a NATO spending hike to 5% of GDP and welcomed Trump's promise to keep US troops in Germany. Now we have breaking news. David Lammy, UK Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, is to arrive in New Delhi on 7th June morning for a 2-day visit. He is to hold meetings with India's Prime Minister and External Affairs Minister Drs. Jaishankar on June 7th evening. He met with Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal at the British High Commission. The UK official is scheduled to depart early Sunday morning. Now we have another breaking news. In a major political development, Bangladesh's interim leader Muhammad Yunus has announced that national elections will be held in early April 2026. This will be the first vote since former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was ousted by a mass uprising in 2024. Yunus said the country needs time to rebuild its democratic institutions to avoid another flawed election. His announcement comes ahead of the Eid al-Adha holiday. Former allies Donald Trump and Elon Musk have turned into public foes, and the feud shows no signs of ending soon. A White House source said President Trump is not interested in talking to Elon Musk following their recent heated exchange. The Wall Street Journal reported that Trump is considering getting rid of his red Tesla, the car which he brought to promote Musk's company during a White House photo op, has been parked outside the West Wing for weeks. Musk's father, Errol, called the dispute a final showdown between two bulls. He said Elon is a businessman, not a politician, and would run the country like a factory if he entered politics. Errol also said Elon stands on principle and never lies, but must understand compromises are necessary. The fallout started when Trump accused Musk of sabotaging the big, beautiful bill by removing electric vehicle tax credits. Musk fired back with unproven claims linking Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. The tension hit markets too, with Tesla shares dropping over 14%, wiping out billions in value. Now we have guests joining us, Ross Feingold. He's a political risk analyst, live from Taipei. Thank you, Ross, for joining us. As a political risk analyst, how dangerous or risky is it when personal grievances between political and corporate giants begin to drive public policy and markets?
That's a really interesting question, primarily because we don't know how and when this will end. But ultimately, President Trump is the president of the United States. He's the elected president. He's the chief executive of the United States government. Elon Musk simply is not. He's the head of several very large and important businesses, and those businesses, in fact, have a lot of contracts with the federal government. But he's still an outsider. He's not a full-time government employee. In fact, his time with the federal government has come to an end. So he's an outsider from the government, and he could comment as much as he wants. But ultimately, Donald Trump is the president. Donald Trump is the one who was elected, and he's the one with the support of the voters who elected him president last November. So I don't think this would have any effect or in the medium or long term on Donald Trump's popularity. Donald Trump's popularity is going to be based on his success managing the economy or other issues that come before the president. His success or his standing in the view of the public is completely unrelated to this back and forth with Elon Musk that we saw on Thursday.
And building on that, what does this feud signal about the fragility of public-private relationships in the U.S. under the Trump administration?
We know that President Trump is often accused of being transactional. This is not the first time that he's had a falling out with someone or he's had a dispute. It's not the first time that he's insulted someone using his social media accounts. And that's simply who Donald Trump is. In fact, he's got elected twice as president being this kind of person. So anything that Donald Trump has said over the course of this back and forth with Elon Musk, none of it comes as a surprise because, as I said, he's had falling outs with people before. He's exchanged insults with people before. And that's just the person that Donald Trump is. But again, the voters have elected him a second time as president of the United States. And it doesn't matter what Elon Musk posts on X. It's not going to change the fact that Donald Trump is going to be the president until January of 2029.
And can Trump's threats to punish a private company via federal contracts be seen as a form of political risk to doing business in the U.S.?
Probably not. I think people know that this is a very highly personal situation between these two gentlemen. The likelihood that Trump will cancel the federal contracts that exist with Musk's company, I would say as of today, that remains low. I mean, canceling the contracts for the rockets that play such a crucial role in the American space program. At the moment, I would say it's remote. It might happen, but I would say it's remote. And for the rest of the corporate world, including companies that have business in front of federal regulators, this situation is completely irrelevant because it's just so personal between the two of them. And most companies are smartly not in this kind of situation where they're in a back and forth with the President of the United States.
And according to how should investors and foreign governments interpret a $152 billion market wipeout caused by a political or / personal feud?
That's also a very good question. Again, I would say it's more a personal feud between the two men. Yeah, Tesla did lose a lot of market value during the trading session on Thursday. Part of that is because Tesla also has contracts with the federal government, and there's this risk, however remote, that President Trump will terminate those contracts. I think this was a bit of an overreaction, though. Tesla makes its money by average folks like me buying a Tesla vehicle. Its success doesn't depend primarily on the Trump administration, although there's some concern from Tesla about the end of electric vehicle credits. But Tesla's biggest risk, frankly, over the past few weeks and months has come from consumers who don't want to buy the car because they don't like that Musk was buddies with Trump. So if anything, maybe a falling out with Trump might help restore Tesla and Musk's image in the minds of some consumers.
And could Elon Musk's public allegations about Epstein and classified files escalate into legal or national security headaches for the administration?
It's certainly possible that Trump would sue Musk for slander, however remote that is. But Trump he's sued media companies before. He sued ABC and got a big settlement. He's in the process of suing CBS. He's sued other media, but those cases have been dismissed in the past because they weren't strong cases. So the possibility exists that he sues Musk for false accusations. Again, I would say that possibility is remote. He'd have to pay his own lawyers a lot of money to bring such a lawsuit. So this might just go away. But of course, now it reintroduces the question of why hasn't the government released some more of those Epstein documents.
And last but not least, will this battle lead to long-term changes in how the U.S. government manages tech contracts and defense deals or space policy?
Probably not, because again, this is more of a personal dispute between the two gentlemen. It got out of hand. Musk objected to the one big beautiful bill, but very quickly the back and forth on social media became very, very personal. But generally speaking, I don't think this affects how the Trump administration deals with the technology industry or does defense acquisitions.
Thank you very much, Ross Feingold, for joining us as a risk analyst from Taipei. Now we move on to our next story. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has confirmed he will attend the upcoming G7 summit in Canada this month. Modi said he received an invitation from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and expressed his gratitude for the invite. The summit will be held in Kananaskis from June 15th to 17th. Modi also congratulated Carney on his recent election victory and said he looks forward to their meeting at the summit. India and Canada share strong democratic ties, and Modi emphasized that both countries will work together with renewed energy based on mutual respect and shared interests. This comes after a period of frosty relations under former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, mainly over issues related to Khalistani separatists in Canada. The G7 includes the world's most industrialized nations: France, Germany, Italy, the UK, Japan, and the US and Canada. Along with the European Union, leaders will discuss key global challenges including the Russia-Ukraine war and the situation in West Asia. Now we have guest joining us, Daniel Bortman. He's a senior correspondent for the National Telegraph, live from Toronto, Canada. So, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has confirmed he will attend the upcoming G7 summit in Canada this month. Modi said he received an invitation from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and expressed his gratitude for the invite. The summit will be held in Kananaskis, Canada from June 15th to 17th. Now we have guest Daniel Bortman. He's a senior correspondent for the National Telegraph. He's joining us live from Toronto, Canada. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How significant is India's presence at a G7 summit that will likely be dominated by talk of Ukraine and West Asia?
I mean, there's layers to that question, and significant to whom? Significant to the world in G7, I'd say minimal. India is usually at the G7, it's just a G7 summit. These are places for world leaders to come together and talk and have photo ops and all that. Now, it's much more significant when you look at Canada-India relations, which have been rocky for the last 2 years, since Canada accused India of murdering Hardip Singh Nichar, and then publicly made it a rather public affair without providing the rather public evidence that would be needed to do so. So there's been a bit of a freeze in Canada-India relations, and if you live in Canada, there's a very, very heavy anti-India sentiment that has been pushed by all factions of our political establishment over the last 2 years. Now, this is interesting because it's a big reversal, and this comes as right after the new election. So, would Modi be invited if Justin Trudeau was prime minister and Jagmeet Singh held a strong position in the minority coalition? 99% chance, no, Modi is not coming. So, what is significant about the Modi visit is it does show that Mark Carney is trying to fix relations, or if not trying to fix relations, isn't burning with a hatred of India that it seems out of place in Canada 2 years ago. So this shows that the Khalistani influence inside the Liberal Party is nowhere near what it was 2 years ago. If you followed Canadian politics, the Khalistanis had this sort of outsized power. A lot of it comes from funding the political parties through narco-terrorism. It's very easy to launder money in Canada, and washing cash through political parties is actually very good. And you can also, they would always be able to get a few thousand people or a few hundred people here and there to sort of stacked candidate voting, the preliminaries or primaries for the American Friends. We don't really have primaries, but the individual MPs, when they're competing against themselves in the Conservative Party, in the Liberal Party, in these internal party nominations, the Khalistanis, among other groups, so the Khalistanis were one of them, were very, very good at rigging these or sort of putting a finger on the scale, so to speak. But what we saw in the last federal election is the Khalistanis made a major misplay. A lot of the major Khalistanis in the Liberal Party kind of retired to pension land and didn't want to take the loss. And they focused a lot on the Conservative Party and infiltrating that because they were up 25 points at the time. So the Khalistanis made a very big push, multi-million dollar, from what I've heard, it's over $10 million into the Conservative Party, really pushed their people in there. But then the Conservative Party completely flubbed the election once the Trump tariffs hit. And Canadian Conservatives are not very proactive thinkers. They're very, very reactive. So they ended up fumbling away an easy to win election. And now it's left the Khalistanis in a very, very precarious position politically because they invested so much in the next 4 years, which they thought were going to be a conservative rule. And now they're standing in the party that's in the opposition and not in power. So what this visit from Modi really indicates, and there was a pushback, there was a lot of media blitz sort of against this. Different, every sort of media outlet came up with one sort of internal, either lefty or Islamist or Khalistani within an organization would write an article like Sikh organizations worried about inviting Modi to the G7. There were a lot of that stuff going on. But for the first time in mainstream publications, in the National Post just this week, there was a John Ivison article about how the Khalistanis and Poilievre's failed gambit by appeasing the Khalistanis, because Stephen Harper came out and said, guys, don't do this, former prime minister. And this has sort of started the precedent where now the National Post has talked about it. Now it's sort of acceptable within the public lexicon. Like, what is this Khalistani movement? What are they doing? So this is, in Canada, this signifies a major loss of political power of the Khalistani movement. And to Canada, India, I think this is a sign that, as I was correct, that relations could not get any worse from the Trudeau area. So my prediction of not getting worse is one pretty easy to come by. Glad I didn't have pie on my face on that one. But I think you will start to see slow improvements. Now there's still the problem of the mass migration and all the fraudsters running through India, exploiting Indian kids, getting them into the West. A lot of that runs through Canada. And again, there's obviously still the high crime and drug money that funds transnational crime and terrorism that threaten both India and Canada. So the major issues, they haven't been solved because I don't think we still have to see if Mark Carney has the will to actually like put criminals in jail. That's a big question: is will criminals go to jail in the next 4 years? Because they didn't in the last 10 years in Canada. So a lot is still going to be determined on like the future of Canada-India relations. But this is a sign that the Khalistanis are no longer this crazy dominant political force in Canada, and it looks like there might be some room for India and Canada to figure this thing out.
Looking into a little bit deeper into this invitation, will Modi's attendance mark a shift in how the G7 engages with non-member democracies like India in a multipolar world?
No, not at all. This is not as significant as people give it up. It's a giant photo op for all intents and purposes. And then there's some talk of okay, yes, the different bilateral relations. I mean, is Trump going to redefine the means of global politics? Maybe. It all seems pretty unstable. I don't think this weekend in Canada, the G7 is going to have any major world-shifting implications going forward. No, it's just another G7 summit. There'll be photos, there'll be handshakes, there'll be vague agreements on general cooperation for the world to something. I wouldn't expect anything major significant to come or world change to come out of G7. I think the only significant thing is it looks like Canada's crusade against India might die with Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh. That's the only real thing coming out of this summit.
Thank you very much, Daniel Bortman. He's a senior correspondent for the National Telegraph, and he joined us from Canada. Now we have a breaking news. China's foreign minister has spoken to his French counterpart, stressing cooperation on trade and artificial intelligence. Beijing welcomed French participation in an AI conference in Shanghai, while urging Paris to respect China's core interests. The minister warned against NATO's role in Russia, asserted Taiwan's status is unlike Ukraine, and called for joint efforts to protect multilateralism and free trade. Now we move on to Middle East. Another deadly day in Gaza as local health officials say 16 Palestinians were killed by Israeli strikes on Friday. Attacks targeted Jabalia, Tufa, and Khan Yunis, with witnesses reporting heavy air and ground strikes on Jabalia and Beit Hanun. The Israeli military issued a new evacuation order for northern Gaza, but has yet to comment on the reported casualties. The U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation said it resumed aid delivery Friday, despite earlier announcing site closures for civilian safety after deadly shootings near Rafah. Footage from GHF shows chaotic scenes. Critics, including the UN, have questioned its neutrality, a charge the group denies. Israel's military says it's offering limited safe hours to access aid, but warns that outside that window, movement in that area could be deadly. The re-escalation follows Israel's renewed offensive against Hamas, ending a 2-month ceasefire back in March. Now we have Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, risk analyst, joining us live from Taipei. Thank you, Ross, for staying with us. With 16 Palestinians reportedly killed in fresh strikes, what assurances, if any, are in place to protect those civilians in densely populated zones like the Jabalia and Khan Yunis?
Israel's not going to give assurances. What Israel will say is that there are designated channels where people should queue up for the food, but also keeping in mind that this is still a combat zone. There are still ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hamas terrorists nearby to the food distribution centers. And that's one of the reasons why the UN and other critics have said that this whole arrangement is a bad idea. Be that as it may, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is distributing food. Civilians are lining up to access the food, but this occurs at the same time that there are hostilities nearby. So it's very dangerous for civilians. But that's the reality of a situation where Hamas does not want to agree to a ceasefire.
And evacuation orders were issued in northern Gaza from what we know. How realistic is relocation for residents with limited options under constant bombardment and nowhere to go?
That's true. It's very difficult for civilians to evacuate. They say, where are we supposed to go? I think from the Israeli side, what they're saying is, we're informing you of upcoming military action in certain sectors, and you need to leave those sectors and you need to move south. And that's pretty much what Israel has been doing throughout the war ever since October of 2023. They give notice to civilians and say, you need to move. Now, civilians, of course, they'll say, but we've been moving and we're still attacked, or we move and then we get attacked to where we've moved to, which was supposed to be a safe location. But again, part of the onus is on Hamas, which is embedding itself with civilians, and that results in ongoing hostilities between the Israeli military and Hamas, very close by to where civilians are.
According to you, should groups accused of partiality be allowed to lead humanitarian aid in active war zones like GHF is doing in Gaza Strip?
That's a really good question, but the reality is, at least as of this moment, they're the only option available. They're the only organization on the ground that's willing to be there. The other organizations only want to be there when there's a ceasefire, but there's a ceasefire proposal on the table that Hamas does not want to accept. This is the U.S. brokered proposal for a 60-day ceasefire, including the release of hostages and the release from the Israeli side of Palestinian prisoners. It's Hamas that doesn't want to agree to that, and under those conditions, other humanitarian organizations are very reluctant to be on the ground. At the moment, it's only the GHF which is willing to be on the ground and provide food aid, and that's just the reality that all the stakeholders have to deal with.
And last but not least, the big question is, who is responsible for ensuring safe and orderly aid delivery when both distributors and recipients face gunfire?
Israel is certainly caught in a very difficult situation here. On the one hand, they have an obligation under international law to safeguard civilians and to feed civilians. On the other hand, they're in the middle of a war with Hamas terrorists. So, they could not fight Hamas, but that's not really a realistic option. So hostilities are ongoing. At the same time, via the GHF, Israel is trying to facilitate aid, but they get criticized for doing that as well, because people say that the GHF is not a neutral party, it's inexperienced, it's a flawed operation, the locations are not ideal for civilians. So Israel is really stuck. Whichever option they choose, they're going to get in trouble. But I'll tell you one thing that's not going to change, as long as Netanyahu is the prime minister, and unless there's a ceasefire agreement, in the absence of which he's going to continue to fight, order his military to fight Hamas.
News. Russia says it killed a man attempting to launch a drone attack on a military site in the Ryazan region. The National Guard claims the suspect was carrying grenades and opened fire when confronted. This comes amid a wave of Ukrainian drone strikes, including a recent attack that damaged Russian nuclear-capable aircraft. Meanwhile, Moscow's mayor says air defenses shot down another drone targeting the capital. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.